Inquisitor Covenant came to consciousness with the taste of brass and copper in her mouth and the absolute certainty that something had been using her body like a vehicle. She'd felt this before, twice actually, both times after encounters with greater daemons. The sensation of being a passenger in your own flesh, watching through eyes that wouldn't obey, screaming in a skull that had been temporarily rented out to something that should not exist. She rolled to her knees, bolt pistol already in hand, decades of combat training overriding the nausea and existential horror. Tech Priest Illuminor 7 was rebooting his systems with frantic binary prayers, his mechadendrites twitching erratically. Rick stood in the center of the HAB unit, portal gun lowered but not holstered, staring at the space where the impossible figure had been. "You," Covenant's voice came out as a rasp. She cleared her throat, years of inquisitorial authority forcing strength back into her words. "Explain, now. What did we just witness?" "Your gods have a sense of humor. Or at least one of them does. Tzeentch, right? The bluebird asshole who's really into chess and destiny?" Covenant's finger tightened on her bolt pistol. The fact that this heretic knew the name of the ruinous powers, spoke it so casually, should have been grounds for immediate execution. But the fact that said ruinous power had just manifested through her to deliver a message meant this was far beyond her authority to handle alone. "How do you know that name?" "I hacked your databases, remember? Read up on your whole 4 evil gods made of emotions situation. It's actually fascinating from a quantum psychology perspective. You've got a dimension where consciousness directly shapes reality, fed by the psychic emanations of trillions of sentient beings. It's like if Freud's id became a parallel universe and also it wanted to murder everyone." Illuminor 7's optical sensors focused on Rick with renewed intensity. His vocal synthesizer crackled with barely contained urgency. "The heretic speaks of the warp with an analytical detachment. This is either profound ignorance or something unprecedented. In the Omnisia's name, I must know, how does your technology function without the warp? How do you translate matter through space without opening a path through that realm?" Rick looked at the tech priest, really looked at him. Past the augmetics and the religious conditioning, there was genuine scientific curiosity. It was buried under layers of dogma and ritual, chained by 10,000 years of enforced ignorance. But it was there. "You really want to know?" "Yes!" The word burst from Illuminor 7 with such force that it bypassed his vocal filters, coming out as raw human desperation. "Illuminor," Covenant's voice cut like a power sword through flesh. "You will not be tempted by heretical—" "Shut up." Rick's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who'd stared down gods and found them wanting. "Both of you, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to explain some basic physics. The Inquisitor is going to listen without shooting me because she wants to know if I'm chaos corrupted. The tech priest is going to listen because he's been intellectually starving his entire life and I'm offering food. And then we're going to have a conversation about what just happened and why one of your evil space gods is interested in me." He pulled out a device and projected a hologram into the air between them. It showed 2 points in space, connected by a glowing line. Normal space travel, you go from point A to point B through the space in between. Warp travel, you dip into a hell dimension where distance is negotiable, but also you might get eaten by demons. My portal gun, I create a temporary Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole, between 2 points in the same dimensional plane. No warp involved, just exploiting quantum foam fluctuations to create stable tunnels through higher dimensional space. Illuminor 7's mechadendrites were twitching so violently they looked like they might achieve independent sentience. But the energy requirements for maintaining a stable wormhole would require a star's output. Not if you're pulling energy from the zero-point field, vacuum energy. The space between atoms isn't empty. It's seething with virtual particles popping in and out of existence. I just borrow some of that energy, promise to give it back later, and use it to punch holes in reality. The universe doesn't notice because I return the energy before the uncertainty principle catches up. The tech priest stared. His cognitive processors were working at maximum capacity, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with 10,000 years of Mechanicus doctrine. It was like watching someone's worldview crumble in real time. That's impossible. The sacred texts say, "Your sacred texts are maintenance manuals someone copied wrong 4,000 years ago and then declared holy. You people had actual science once, real understanding. Then you decided to worship it instead of practicing it, and now you've forgotten how anything actually works." Covenant had heard enough heresy to fill a library. She'd executed tech priests for less than this conversation, but she also recognized strategic value when she saw it. If what you say is true, if you can travel without the warp, that changes everything. The Imperium loses billions to warp travel. Ships disappear. Entire fleets are swallowed by the immaterium. Geller field failures turn vessels into floating tombs full of daemons. If we could bypass the warp entirely, yeah, you could save your dying empire. Maybe. If you could reverse engineer my technology, mass produce it, and distribute it across 1,000,000 worlds without your religious establishment executing everyone involved for tech heresy. How's that been working out for you historically? The Inquisitor's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. But here's the real problem. Your Chaos God buddy, he doesn't care about the portal gun. He cares about me, about what I represent. I'm from outside your system, outside fate, outside destiny, outside all the psychic bullshit that holds this universe together. And that makes me either a tool he wants to use or a threat he wants to eliminate. Or both, Covenant said quietly. The Inquisition had taught her to think like the enemy. Tudge didn't do anything for a single reason. Every action had 17 hidden purposes, each one feeding into the next, like gears in a cosmic clock designed to break reality. Morty, who had been quietly hyperventilating in the corner, finally spoke up. "Rick, can we please just leave? Go home? Let these people deal with their own problems?" Rick didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his scanner, at the readings from the brief manifestation, running analysis that his equipment wasn't really designed to handle. I absolutely should. This universe is a nightmare held together by spite and prayer. It's got evil gods, space zombies, murder mushrooms, and a government that makes fascism look like a pleasant alternative. Every second I stay here increases the probability that I get corrupted, killed, or worse. He paused. But that thing that just happened? That was genuine interest from a higher dimensional entity. Not possession, not corruption. Interest. And that means there's something here that even a being made of pure change finds novel. That's actually kind of fascinating. Rick, no. Morty, When's the last time anything genuinely surprised me? When's the last time I encountered something I didn't immediately understand? This universe shouldn't work. It's held together by duct tape, religious fervor, and mass human sacrifice. But it does work, and I want to know why. Covenant recognized that look. She'd seen it before in the eyes of tech priests who discovered forbidden STC fragments, in scholars who found demonic tomes, in anyone who made the fatal mistake of thinking they could study chaos without being changed by it. "You're already corrupted," she said. Not an accusation, an observation. Not corrupted, curious. There's a difference. "In this universe," Covenant said, holstering her bolt pistol but not relaxing her stance, "there isn't." Hours after the impact, lightning still carved the skies above Velkara into jagged veins of light. Vox traffic across the entire hemisphere was jammed with superstition and static. Pilgrims chanting, soldiers whispering, psychers screaming. The Imperium was never short on miracles. Most were just misfires of the warp or well-timed exterminations. But this was different. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared the phenomenon an omniscient manifestation. Within hours, a convoy of Skitari transports rumbled toward the impact zone, cog-engraved banners whipping in the gale. To them, the Thunder God was no god at all, but a potential relic, a fragment of divine machine logic fallen from the stars. At the same time, the ecclesiarchy mobilized. Sermons echoed through every vox amplifier. "The Emperor has sent his thunder to smite the heretic." Statues were hastily erected in the storm's image, faces carved in the likeness of a golden-haired angel whose name no one yet knew. And above it all, Inquisitor Lyra Mavain watched. Every fragment of data whispered the same impossible truth. Something ancient, something divine had entered the galaxy. Inquisitor Lyra Mavain leaned forward, her augmetic eyes narrowing. On one screen, the storm over Velkara pulsed like a living thing. On another, a data feed from orbit showed the crater slowly healing, glass hardening into perfect hexagonal patterns. "Binary symmetry," murmured her tech adept, voice trembling. That should not occur naturally." Lara silenced him with a glance. "Nothing natural survives in the Imperium. Patch through to the nearest Astartes garrison." Moments later, a holographic sigil flared to life, the two-headed axe of the Storm Lords, a proud White Scar successor chapter stationed within the sector. Their chapter master, Tenzin Khor, appeared in the projection, a towering figure in crimson-edged power armor, his eyes sharp as flensing blades. "Inquisitor Mavain," he rumbled, his voice a low thunder of its own. "You request our aid?" Lyra nodded. An unidentified entity fell from orbit, displays control over atmospheric phenomena, energy manipulation beyond any sanctioned tech. My troopers are dead. I want him contained before the ecclesiarchy turns this into another crusade of zealots. Khorne's lip twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Contain thunder, Inquisitor? You ask much?" "Contain it," she said, voice like ice, "or I'll have the Ordo Xenos declare it heretical, and your chapter can answer for negligence." A pause, then a curt nod. "The Emperor's will be done." Down on Velkara, the storm's heart moved. Thor Thor Odinson, son of Odin, breaker of Jotuns, wielder of Mjolnir, trudged through the wasteland, bewildered and burning with questions. His senses told him nothing familiar. The air stank of oil and decay. The stars were wrong, their constellations alien. He'd fought the world serpent, he'd faced the end of gods. But this realm, this age, was stranger than any hell he had known. Midgard, he murmured, gripping Mjolnir tightly. What shadow of thee remains? He passed a shattered shrine, crude metal icons depicting a figure in armor hallowed by mechanical wings. The script beneath read, "The God Emperor protects." Thor frowned. "A god of man," he said, "yet bound in chains of steel and fire." He looked upward, sensing distant eyes watching him through orbital auspex. And his servants bear no love of gods? As if in answer, the ground trembled, the air thickened with static. From the haze ahead came the roar of engines, eight-wheeled transports bristling with guns, their hulls painted in crimson and white. The Stormlords had arrived. The lead vehicle's ramp slammed open, and Space Marines stepped out, demigods of war, each standing taller than any mortal, clad in power armor that hissed and growled with machine spirit aggression. The foremost warrior, a captain named Khorne leveled his plasma pistol and spoke through a thunderous vox. "By the authority of the Emperor of mankind, identify yourself, entity." Thor tilted his head, bemused. His voice rolled like thunder across the plains. "I am Thor, son of Odin. I command the storm and bear the hammer Mjolnir. Who challenges me?" The Marines exchanged glances through their helms. One muttered a prayer to the Omnisia, another to the Emperor. Khorne's vox crackled. "We challenge no man of faith, but gods. We do not serve false ones." Thunder cracked. Mjolnir rose. The wind screamed as storm clouds twisted into a furious vortex. Lightning flared from the hammer's head, arcing down into the dust between them, close enough to melt rock, far enough to warn. "False?" Thor's voice was cold now. "Then test the truth of your thunder, warrior." They fired. Bolts screamed through the storm, explosive, mass-reactive shells designed to pulverize heretics. But Mjolnir moved faster than thought. Each shot that neared him was shattered mid-air, the fragments spinning harmlessly away in a blaze of light. Then Thor moved. He surged forward like a tidal wave of fury, hammer spinning, striking the ground. Lightning cascaded through the transports, overloading their machine spirits in a single blinding instant. Half the Marines were thrown clear. The others braced, chanting the litany of endurance, servos whirring as their armor fought to stand. Veth activated his plasma sword, blue energy rippling along its edge, and charged. The two met like gods of war, thunder versus plasma, lightning versus steel. The impact threw arcs of energy 100 meters into the sky. Mjolnir caught the blade, sparks streaming between them. "You fight well," he growled. "Your courage honors you." "And your power blasphemes," Veth spat. "No god walks among men." They locked eyes, one a storming tempest, the other an unshakable soldier of faith. For a heartbeat, both paused, both understood something vast and terrible was watching them. The warp itself, rippling with the echoes of a god's return. Far above, aboard the impassable will, Inquisitor Lyra Mavane's auspex screens flared red. Her tech priest croaked in binary horror. "The warp is resonating, my lady. The entity's presence is—" Static drowned him out. Lyra stared at the storm below. She felt it in her bones, a being of impossible magnitude, bending reality merely by existing. And under her breath she whispered, not to her crew, not to the Emperor, but to the storm itself. "If you are a god, then Emperor, help us all." The thunder rolled on. Each lightning strike hammered reality itself, turning the ash plains into rivers of molten glass. Vox traffic was unreadable. Orbital sensors flickered in and out. On the impassable will, Inquisitor Lyra Mavane stared down at the chaos her monitors struggled to capture. To the untrained eye, it was a tempest. To hers, it was data. Energy spikes, bending warp harmonics, readings that danced on the edge of blasphemy. "He's not just manipulating weather," she said quietly. "He's wrestling with it." Below, the battle between Thor and the Stormlords had reached a fragile standoff. Captain Khorne Veth, armor scarred and cracked, knelt among the ruins of his scorched strike force. He had fought orcs, demons, and traitor Astartes, but never something like this. The being before him was no psyker, no alien. He was raw divinity given form. Thor's lightning had dimmed, his breathing slowed. He lowered Mjolnir and gazed at the kneeling warrior. "Rise, son of this emperor you name. Your valor earns no shame. You sought to defend your realm, and for that I bear no anger." Veth rose carefully. His armor hissed as cracked servos compensated for the damage. You claim to be a god? Such claims are forbidden. Gods draw chaos." Thor's brow furrowed. Chaos? At that word, the air itself trembled. The warp heard. In that moment, every psyker on Velkara screamed. The name had weight in this universe. It pulled at the edges of the storm like claws on silk. The clouds darkened further, turning from silver blue to bruised purple. Veth's helmet lenses flared crimson as warning sigils flashed across his HUD. "You've drawn something to us." Thor's eyes narrowed. Lightning flickered around him, forming a protective ring of power. "Then let it come." He did not yet understand the truth that here even gods could bleed. Hours later, within the city's deepest sanctum, the ecclesiarchy gathered. 1,000 candles burned beneath the image of the emperor. Priests in golden vestments shouted over the thunder. "He walks among us," cried Cardinal Arvo Vel. "The emperor has sent his storm. The heretics who doubt shall burn." The faithful roared. For them, faith was survival. Belief was oxygen. The arrival of the Thunder Saint became gospel within hours. Relics were forged from melted lightning rods. Pilgrims dragged themselves through acid rain, whispering prayers to the storm of deliverance. Lyra Mavane's voice cut through the chanting like a scalpel. "Enough." The cardinal turned. "You dare interrupt?" "I dare silence heresy. The emperor does not send angels. He sends orders, and mine are to contain this entity before you idiots turn him into another warp-born miracle." Her rosette glimmered in the candlelight, the mark of the Inquisition, indisputable authority. The room fell to whispers. She continued, pacing slowly. "He may appear divine, he may wield power beyond comprehension, but the warp feeds on faith. Every prayer you utter strengthens whatever stirs inside that storm." For the first time, fear crept into the Cardinal's voice. "You mean it's a daemon?" Lyra hesitated. "I mean it's something, and the warp has taken notice." Back on the plains, Thor stared into the clouds that began to swirl unnaturally, not with lightning, but with faces, twisted, screaming forms. He sensed their hunger immediately. "These are not of Asgard," he murmured. Khorne stood beside him, one arm missing its gauntlet, servos hissing with damage. "No, they are the stuff of nightmares, daemons. The Imperium bleeds when mortals call gods by their name." Thor raised Mjolnir, the hammer humming like a living heart. "Then we shall give them a thunder they will not forget." The first daemon broke through the veil, a serpentine horror of molten flesh and steel, its voice a chorus of agony. Warp lightning clawed at Thor's skin, but he merely roared in defiance and hurled Mjolnir skyward. The hammer spun faster than mortal sight could follow, tearing through the air, then returned to his hand with a thunderclap that split the creature in half. Khorne watched, awe written across his scarred face. Even the machine spirits of his armor seemed to hum in reverence. "By the throne!" The second wave followed, dozens, then hundreds of warp-spawned horrors. The sky boiled with wings and fire. Thor laughed, not the laughter of mockery, but the fierce joy of a warrior born for impossible odds. "Now this," he bellowed, "feels like home." He leapt into the heart of the storm, hammer swinging in arcs of pure lightning. Each strike vaporized demon flesh, sending echoes of divine wrath through the warp. But each blow came with a cost. For each slain horror, Thor's light dimmed slightly. The warp absorbed his essence, studying him, twisting reflections of his power into its own image. Above, aboard the impassable will, Lyra's pikers collapsed, blood running from their eyes. "It's learning him, the warp, it's learning his shape!" Lyra's expression hardened. "Then we stop this before it learns to become him." She turned to her Vox officer. "Signal Captain Veth. Tell him the Inquisition authorizes sanctioned containment." "Ma'am?" Lyra looked at the raging storm. "If that means killing a god, so be it." Below, amidst fire and ruin, Thor hurled Mjolnir one last time. The hammer struck with the force of an orbital bombardment, annihilating the daemons around him. The shockwave rolled for miles, flattening the wastes. And for a moment, a single, perfect heartbeat, the storm went silent. Mjolnir returned to his grasp, and Thor sank to one knee, breath ragged, his godly aura flickering. He looked to the horizon, where human faith, fear, and fanaticism had already begun to twist his presence into legend. "These mortals," he whispered, "they believe too fiercely. It will draw doom upon them." Khorne, bloodied but unbroken, limped forward. "Then help us stand against it, Thunder Lord. The Emperor's realm endures only because warriors like you bleed beside us." Thor smiled faintly. "Then let the thunder march with man." Above them, the warp rippled, something vast, red and grinning, stirring in the darkness. The name Khorne whispered across reality like a curse. The storm was only beginning. The sky had turned the color of dried blood, lightning pulsing with unnatural rhythm, the warp itself breathing, watching, waiting. In the distance, the wrecks of the Mechanicus Guitari transport still smoked. The storm's heart was silent, but alive with tension. And in that silence, humanity prepared for war. The Inquisition had declared Operation Sanctus Tempestus. Every surviving regiment on Velcara was ordered to converge on the site of the divine incursion. Astartes' elements of the Storm Lord stood ready, grim and disciplined. The Astra Militarum, those countless legions of the common man, trudged through the ash with lasguns clutched in trembling hands. At their head marched Commissar Dalen Kreutz, his greatcoat snapping in the wind, his bionic eye glowing faintly in the crimson haze. "Listen well," he bellowed through the Vox amplifier. "If the Inquisition says this thunder spawn is to be contained, then by the throne we contain him. The Emperor's will does not tremble before any false god." Behind him, 100,000 boots answered in grim rhythm. Inquisitor Lyra Mavane watched the deployment from orbit, hands clasped tightly behind her back. The air on the impassable Will's command deck was tense with static. The ship's machine spirit growled, unhappy with the storm's interference. Her tech adept knelt beside the main console. "My lady," he rasped in mechanical monotone, "the entity's energy pattern, it resonates with the Imperium, but also cancels parts of it. We have never seen such polarity. It's as though he is both anathema and catalyst," Lyra finished coldly. The adept nodded. "Yes, a god who denies his own reflection." Lyra's gaze hardened. "Prepare orbital batteries for precision strike authorization. No detonation until my command." Her acolyte flinched. "You intend to kill him, my lady. If he cannot be killed, then we'll find out how much it hurts." Down below, Thor stood amidst silence. The last demon's ashes had scattered to the wind, leaving behind the smell of ozone and scorched earth. Khorne Veth stood beside him, helm off, face blackened and bloodied. The Astartes captain stared toward the horizon where dust clouds rose, an army's approach. "Your Inquisition moves against me," Thor said softly, watching the lights march closer. "They move against what they fear," Veth replied, "and fear in the Imperium always pulls the trigger. Then let them come." Thunder rolled again, but this time Thor didn't call it. It came on its own. The warp rippled in response to the gathered faith, fear, and fury of millions, a psychic storm born of mortal emotion. Thor could feel it pressing against his mind, whispering in tongues he did not know. Worship, rage, blood. The voices came from nowhere and everywhere. "They already pray to you. Let them spill blood in your name. Become what they need." Thor snarled and shook his head, gripping Mjolnir so tightly that the handle cracked. "No, I am no god of slaughter." Yet the warp laughed. The Astra Militarum arrived at the edges of the blast crater, setting up fire lines and artillery positions. Bane blades rumbled into place, their turrets humming with deadly power. Lassfire filled the horizon like red rain. From above, Valkyries streaked through the storm, their payloads dropping in blazing trails. Thor raised Mjolnir. The sky answered. Lightning devoured the incoming shells, detonating them mid-air. Plasma bolts curved away. Last fire dissipated in crackling webs of electricity. His silhouette stood against the storm, every strike of light shaping him into myth and madness. Commissar Kreutz, standing at the forefront, slammed a fresh power cell into his bolt pistol and shouted over the din, "Focus all fire! Bring it down!" The Thunder God walked forward. Each step shattered the earth. When his hammer fell, tanks buckled like toys. Guardsmen were thrown skyward by shock waves alone. To the mortals, it was not a battle. It was a catastrophe. "Why do you fight me?" Thor roared over the destruction. "I came seeking truth, not war." But his words were lost beneath the endless hymn of lasguns and explosions. Khorne Veth tried to halt the slaughter, voxing the Inquisition command net. "Inquisitor Lyra, cease fire! He's not our enemy!" Lyra's voice crackled through static. "You're too close to see, Captain. He's warping reality. If he survives this, the warp will claim him completely." "And if he dies?" Veth demanded. A pause. "Then he dies as proof that even gods can bleed for the Imperium." Lightning met last fire. Plasma met thunder. For hours, the plains of Velkhara became a theater of apocalypse. But amidst that storm of fire, something began to stir, faint at first, then growing, a heartbeat, deep and terrible, resonating through both reality and the warp. The demon's laughter echoed once more, carried on unseen winds. The storm flickered crimson. In that instant, Thor's lightning faltered, and he heard it. A voice, ancient and booming, calling his name from the other side of the veil. "Thor Odinson, God of War, you trespass in my realm." Every marine, every guardsman, every psychic felt it. The psychic echo burned through minds like fire. Men dropped their weapons and screamed. Khorne fell to one knee. Thor turned his gaze upward. Beyond the clouds, through the warp-shifting curtain, he saw a shadow, colossal, horned, and crowned in brass. "Who are you?" he growled, lightning blazing from his eyes, "to speak thus to me?" The voice laughed. The sky bled. "I am Khorne." Far above, Lyra Mavane watched the warp signature spike to impossible levels. Alarms screamed. The storm turned crimson on every spectral display. "Emperor's mercy," she whispered. "He's drawn the attention of a chaos god." The tech adept's metallic voice trembled. "My lady, what do we do?" She stared into the endless crimson storm below. "We pray," she said softly, "that the Thunder God remembers what side he's on." The planet trembled as the first echoes of the blood god's laughter rippled across reality. And Thor, for the first time since Ragnarok, felt the chill of true war. Reality tore itself open above Velkhara. What had once been a storm of lightning and ash now became a swirling wound in the sky, a crimson vortex spilling rivers of molten light. The air thickened with rage, the warp howling like a living beast unleashed from its cage. From that rift descended legions. Brass-armored bloodletters marched in formation, their blades aflame with warp fire. The ground burned where they walked. Above them, juggernauts thundered across the horizon, iron beasts with skulls for faces, bellowing as they trampled corpses into mud. The warp's heartbeat grew louder, pulsing with the rhythm of slaughter. At the center of it all, Thor stood unmoved. His cape whipped violently in the storm, and the hammer in his hand hummed with the same energy that had once torn worlds apart. "Khorne," he muttered, lightning crackling across his chest plate. "I know your kind, gods who take without giving, who twist honor into bloodshed." The warp answered with laughter so vast it shook the atmosphere. "Honor? There is no honor, only war. You are mine now, Thunderer. You carry the flame of conquest in your veins. You shall drown worlds in blood for my glory." Thor's eyes blazed like twin suns. "I serve no master." He lifted Mjolnir high, and lightning screamed. The hammer blazed with a purity that the warp could not corrupt, a shard of Asgard's lost divinity burning against the darkness. When he brought it down, reality cracked like glass. Hundreds of bloodletters disintegrated in a single explosion of holy thunder. Their essence boiled away, leaving the stench of ozone and scorched metal. But for every demon slain, 1,000 more poured through the rift. Captain Khorne rallied what remained of his company. "Form firing lines. Target the rift. We hold the line or we die here." Bolters roared, chainswords screamed, and the sons of the Emperor fought shoulder to shoulder with mortal guardsmen. But the demonic tide was endless. The air was thick with black ichor and the screams of the dying. Khorne looked toward the blazing figure in the storm's heart, Thor, swinging his hammer in wide arcs of pure destruction. Every strike was a miracle. He voxed Inquisitor Mjolnir through static. "Lyra, he fights the daemons. Khorne himself, he's not the enemy." Her reply was faint through interference. "Then pray he stays that way, Captain. If Khorne takes him, there'll be nothing left to save." On the ground, Thor's battle became legend. He hurled Mjolnir, and each throw split the skies. The hammer tore through ranks of daemons like a comet, then returned to his grasp, wreathed in flames. Yet even he was slowing. For every enemy he smote, his wounds deepened. Blood ran down his arm, not mortal blood, but something older, heavier, filled with power. Khorne's laughter rolled like thunder. "Your blood is sacred. Your rage is pure. Fight long enough, and you will understand me." "I am not your champion," Thor growled through gritted teeth. "I am your end." Then came the avatar of Khorne. It rose from the warp fissure, a titan of brass and fury, its body a mountain of blades and molten rage. Its axe was a city-sized cleaver, dripping with psychic gore. Every step shook continents. Even the Asterace fell silent. The sky turned black as the Titan raised its weapon. "Who are you to deny Khorne's will?" Thor's voice rose to meet it, defiant, thunderous, divine. "I am the son of Odin, protector of realms, and I will not kneel before butchers." He hurled Mjolnir with all his might. The impact was apocalyptic. The hammer struck the Titan square in the chest, a detonation brighter than dawn, louder than a dying sun. The shockwave annihilated half the battlefield, vaporizing daemons and tanks alike. When the light faded, the avatar staggered, a crater gaping in its chest, but it did not fall. It laughed. "You bleed. That is enough." The Titan swung its axe. Thor raised his hammer to block, and for the first time, Mjolnir trembled. From orbit, Inquisitor Lyra watched the impossible unfold. Energy readings spiked beyond known thresholds. Reality itself began to fracture across the planet's crust. "By the throne," whispered the tech priest, "if the rift widens any further, then this world dies," Lyra said grimly, "unless he seals it." She turned to her communications officer. "Patch me into his frequency. Whatever he is, he can understand us. He must." Static. Then faintly, Thor's voice answered through the interference, calm but filled with pain. "Your world will not fall while I yet breathe." Lightning flared, brighter than ever. Thor drew in the storm, all of it. The clouds spiraled toward him, forming a vortex of pure electricity and warp energy. Mjolnir blazed white-hot, every rune upon it burning with the fury of ancient gods. He roared a single word that split heaven and hell alike. "Enough!" The hammer came down. The explosion was not light, it was purity. The warp screamed as the rift imploded, sucking the daemons back into the void. The Avatar's bellow of rage was cut short, torn apart by the collapsing gate. When the storm cleared, the plains of Velkhara were silent. Nothing moved. Only Thor stood, kneeling in the ashes, Mjolnir buried in the ground beside him. His armor was cracked, his cape burned away, his body scarred by warp fire. Yet he still breathed. Inquisitor Lyra's ship descended through the thinning clouds. When her boots touched the ground, she found him waiting. The Thunder God looked upon her with weary eyes, ancient, burdened, resolute. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. "You've saved a world, godling, but the Imperium doesn't trust miracles." "Nor do I," he said quietly. "Then we understand each other," she replied. For a long moment neither spoke. The storm above them finally began to fade. "What will you do now?" she asked. Thor looked toward the sky, toward the stars, and beyond them the roiling darkness of the warp. "If your galaxy breeds such gods, then I will find them, and I will remind them what honor means." He lifted Mjolnir once more. Lightning danced along its edge, and with a flash of pure light, the Thunder God vanished, leaving behind only silence, and a world forever scarred by his coming. Inquisitor Lyra Mavain whispered into the wind, "The Imperium protects, but today it was thunder that answered." The storm was gone, but the legend of the Thunder God of Velkhara had only begun. Silence hung over Velkhara like the aftermath of divine judgment. The storm had passed, but the scars remained. Charred ground stretched to the horizon, and the air still shimmered with residual warp static. Inquisitor Lyra Mavain stood amidst the ruin. her rebreather rasping as she surveyed the dead. The crater where Thor had unleashed his final strike was kilometers wide, its edges glowing faintly with blue-white energy that refused to fade. Mechanicus servitors were already at work, collecting fragments of fused glass and melted ceramite for sacred analysis. Adeptus Astartes of the Cadian 9th Regiment marched in silent vigilance. They had fought daemons before, but none could remember victory coming with such divine force. Above them all loomed the unspoken question, what now? Because Thor was gone, vanished in the thunder flash. No body, no signal, only a lingering hum in the atmosphere that made every Vox unit whisper with ghostly static. Lyra's second, interrogator Vera, broke the silence. If he truly was a god, my lady, perhaps he's returned to his realm. Lyra turned her cold gaze toward the storm-racked horizon. In this galaxy, interrogator, no one leaves the warp untouched. If he's alive, he's trapped somewhere, and the warp remembers everything that enters it. Meanwhile, far beyond the physical realm, Thor fell through eternity. The warp was not a place, it was emotion given form. His descent was not through space, but through rage, fear, and memory. He saw worlds devoured by shadow, mortals torn apart in worship of false gods, and oceans of blood that stretched beyond comprehension. The laughter of Khorne still echoed faintly, not victorious, but intrigued. You reject me, Thunderer, yet every blow you strike is rage made manifest. You will return to me in time. Thor's answer was a wordless roar of defiance, his hammer blazing in the void. But for every bolt of light he summoned, 1,000 shadows clawed back. He was drowning in a sea of damned souls, and for the first time in his immortal life, he felt doubt. Is this the price of defiance? To fight forever against the darkness, never winning, never ending? The warp answered with visions. He saw the Imperium of man, endless cities of stone and faith, entire populations kneeling before the corpse of their emperor. A being so powerful, so decayed, that his existence sustained the galaxy itself. Thor's heart twisted. This emperor, he holds their faith as chains. But then he saw deeper. Flashes of battlefields where Astartes died screaming in the name of this emperor, holding back horrors that would consume the stars. He felt their courage, their sacrifice, and their love for a god who never answered. He clenched his jaw. He may not answer them, but I will. Across the warp, something heard it. A ripple spread, a faint pulse of golden light that cut through the screaming madness. For a moment, the daemons fell silent. Warp predators turned their heads in fear. And from the light emerged a figure clad in radiant armor, his presence calm but infinite. Thor blinked. Even gods could feel awe. Who are you? The figure's eyes burned like dying suns. I am he who sits upon the throne, the light of Terra, the dream that holds this galaxy together. The Emperor of mankind stood before him, not as the decayed husk upon the golden throne, but as the radiant god he had once been in the age of strife. You fight with honor, son of Odin, but you do not understand this realm. I understand enough. You bind your people with fear. I bind them with purpose. Without fear, they would worship the dark. Without my chains, they would fall to ruin. You would see them free. I would see them alive. The two gods regarded each other in silence, their words echoing through the psychic ocean. Your world bleeds, Thor said. Your people die screaming, yet you sit upon your throne silent. Because if I arise, they die faster. Because gods like you tore the fabric of reality long before mankind learned to crawl. Lightning rippled around Thor's form. Then teach me how to fight your enemies without becoming one. The Emperor's gaze softened, almost pitying. Few can, but if you truly seek to protect, you may yet serve the light, not as a god, but as a weapon. The warp shuddered, and the Emperor's form began to fade. Return to the realm of men, Thunderer. Your storm is not yet spent. Thor gasped as reality solidified around him. He crashed down upon Valkara once more, lightning spearing from the heavens. Adeptus Mechanicus auspexes screamed as energy levels spiked. Guardsmen scattered, believing the daemons had returned. But Lyra Mavain stood her ground. When the smoke cleared, she saw him standing there, battered but alive. "You came back," she whispered. "I was reminded of my duty," he said softly. "Then the Emperor has judged you worthy." Thor's jaw tightened. "No, he warned me." "Of what?" she frowned. He looked skyward, eyes burning like storms. "Of what comes next." High above the planet, the stars flickered, not with natural light, but with movement. Vast shadows drifted across the void, each the size of a continent. The Tyrannids had come, drawn by the psychic maelstrom that Thor's battle had unleashed. Their hive fleets whispered in darkness, hungering for new prey. And deep in the warp, Khorne's laughter echoed once more, not defeated, but delighted. Let them come. The game continues. The skies above Valkara darkened once more, but this time it was not the warp that blotted out the light. They came like an eclipse. The Tyrannid swarm, drawn by the echo of psychic storms and bloodshed, poured into the system like a living tidal wave. The void itself shimmered with the pulsing glow of their hive ships, each one a chitinous leviathan, bleeding spores and acid trails into the upper atmosphere. For the soldiers of the Imperium, the nightmare began again. The Vox channels screamed warnings. Defense lasers ignited in orbit. On the surface, the ash fields that had barely cooled from the demonic incursion flared once more under the descent of biopods, spewing rivers of claws and teeth onto blackened ground. Inquisitor Lyra Mavain watched the Auspex readings in grim silence. Her ship, the impassable Will, shuddered as the first impacts rattled the crust below. "They're feeding on the residue," said Tech Priest Galvion, voice jittering through a burst of static. "The psychic wound Thor opened, it's a beacon to them. They come to consume the scars of the warp." "Then they'll find lightning waiting," Lyra murmured. Thor stood atop the ruins of a Mechanicus spire, his eyes turned skyward. Mjolnir pulsed faintly in his hand, alive once more with that strange, divine hum that defied Mechanicus comprehension. He could feel it. A hunger unlike chaos, not hate, not ambition, only the cold, endless instinct to devour. "These creatures, they have no gods, no soul, only hunger," he muttered. Captain Khorne Veth, his armor scorched and dented from the last battle, approached the Thunder God with grim purpose. "We've faced the Tyranids before. They do not parley, they do not break, they only eat." "Then we give them something they cannot digest," Thor replied. Lightning rippled through his armor. The storm began to gather again, but this was not the chaotic tempest of his arrival. It was disciplined, focused, forged from resolve rather than rage. "Captain," Thor continued, "rally your warriors. Tell them this day they stand with thunder." Veth nodded. "Aye, my lord, the Emperor wills it." "And so does Asgard," Thor answered quietly. Hours later, the world burned anew. The Tyranid vanguard crashed against the human defenses like a flood of knives. Termagants and Hormagaunts by the millions swarmed the trenches, their screeches a living wave of madness. Spore mines rained from above, bursting in clouds of acid and ichor. Yet the defenders did not yield. Cadian shock troopers fired until their lasguns melted. The Mechanicus unleashed macro cannons forged from sacred relics. And in the midst of the slaughter, lightning walked among them. Thor struck like divine vengeance. Every swing of Mjolnir shattered the score of Tyranids. His hammer sang with holy fury, arcs of energy vaporizing swarms by the hundreds. The very air around him became a killing field. And yet, the swarm adapted. The hive mind learned his rhythm. Massive carnifexes surged from below, their carapaces thick with mirrored chitin that reflected energy strikes. Skyward, harpies dove through the storm, spitting acid that corroded even divine metal. Thor was surrounded. The storm he commanded turned violent, chaotic, almost desperate. Mjolnir's blow dimmed under the sheer number of enemies pressing in. Then came the Hive Tyrant. It descended on wings that blotted out the sun, a mountain of claws and bone blades. Its mind pressed against Thor's consciousness like a wet vice. It didn't speak with words, but with hunger. "You are not flesh. You are power. You will be broken and consumed." Thor grimaced, gripping Mjolnir tighter. "You consume worlds to grow stronger, but I am no world." He leapt, meeting the tyrant's charge head-on. The impact split the battlefield. Shockwaves tore apart nearby spires. Guardsmen and Tyranids alike were hurled aside as god and monster collided. The tyrant's talons lashed out, rending divine flesh. Thor countered with a thunderous blow that sent fragments of bone armor flying. But it was relentless. Its psychic will pressed into his mind, trying to drown him in instinct and hunger. For a moment, the thunder god staggered. Visions flashed before him, the faces of worlds already consumed, the echo of civilizations erased without memory. Then he heard another voice. "Stand, Thunderer." It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. The Emperor's voice, whispering through the storm. "Do not fight as a god. Fight as a man who remembers what he protects." Thor's eyes flared. He slammed his boot into the ground and roared, channeling the storm inward. His lightning no longer sought to destroy, it sought to illuminate. He hurled Mjolnir skyward. The hammer shot through the clouds like a star being born, tearing open the blackened heavens. Lightning cascaded down in torrents of light so intense it blinded the swarm. The tyrant lunged again, only to meet the returning hammer head first. Mjolnir struck true. The tyrant exploded in a blast of divine energy, its psychic scream echoing across the hive mind. Thousands of lesser Tyranids convulsed and died as their connection flickered. When the light faded, Thor stood amid mountains of burning chitin. The storm had won. On the orbital bridge, Lyra Mavain watched the readings stabilize for the first time in days. "He did it," Thayara whispered. "He broke their link." "For now," Lyra replied. "But the swarm never stops. They'll send another synapse creature, and another, until nothing's left." Galvion turned his mechanodendrites toward her. "Then we must harness his power, Inquisitor. Study him, replicate him." Lyra's expression hardened. "We do not replicate gods, Tech Priest. We survive them." She turned back to the display. Thor's figure was a glowing beacon on the surface of Valkara, but in the warp's reflection, his light burned too bright. The hive mind had noticed, and so had something else. A whisper in the Imperium stirred once more, not Khorne this time, but something colder, older, watching. Tzeentch smiled. "Change is coming, little storm." "The storm never truly ends in the 41st millennium. It simply learns to whisper." Days after the Tyranid vanguard's annihilation, Valkara lay beneath skies too still to trust. The air no longer crackled with lightning. It shimmered with something stranger, subtler. Vox lines hissed with phantom signals. Cogitators spoke in reversed binaric. Astropaths dreamed of a golden hammer spinning endlessly through a maze of glass. Inquisitor Lyra Mavain did not sleep. She sat alone in the command sanctum of the impossible will, eyes fixed on the holomap of the system. Faint warp signatures rippled at the edges, coiling like snakes. "Every victory costs us more reality," she muttered. Clarify, my lady," asked her interrogator, Vera. "The warp is reacting to him," Lyra said. "Each act of divinity tears the veil thinner. The Emperor's light holds, but barely. The Thunder God's power, whatever its source, doesn't belong here. The galaxy is trying to rewrite itself around him." "Then he's changing the future?" "No," Lyra whispered. "He's creating one." Down on the surface, Thor felt it too. He stood upon the shattered remains of a Mechanicus relay tower, gazing toward the distant horizon. The corpses of Tyranids were still being burned in great pyres that bled green smoke into the dusk. Yet his mind was elsewhere, haunted by something unseen. He could feel eyes upon him, not the gaze of mortals, but of something older, infinitely patient. A voice drifted through the wind. "A storm that brings order to chaos. How quaint." Thor spun, Mjolnir humming. The air rippled like water, and from the shimmer stepped a figure in robes of constantly shifting color, eyes glowing like twin suns behind a mask of porcelain. A lord of change. Feathers glimmered, turning from indigo to crimson to gold. It bowed mockingly. "I have watched you, son of Odin. You crack the sky, smite the beasts, roar against the blood god. But all your fury does is feed the pattern." "Another demon," Thor growled. "Speak quickly before I unmake you." The creature chuckled, voice echoing in multiple tones. "Unmake? You misunderstand. You make too much, godling. Your arrival, your lightning has rewritten the skein of fate. You have become a knot even I cannot untangle." Mjolnir flared. "Then you know your danger." "Oh, but you are the danger, Thunderer. Do you not see? You stand in a realm that worships death. You bring them hope, faith, inspiration. And hope is the greatest lie of all. My master feeds upon change, upon the struggle to believe in impossible salvation. Every soul that looks upon you and whispers, 'Miracle,' becomes mine." Thor's grip tightened. The feathers on the demon's body began to smolder under invisible heat. "Then you shall be their miracle, one that burns away lies like you." The Lord of Change only smiled. "Burn then, light the galaxy. Every flame you kindle casts a shadow, and my master is patient." Then it vanished, leaving behind only drifting feathers and a faint scent of ozone. When Thor returned to the Imperial lines, he found confusion waiting. Guardsmen saluted with trembling reverence. Astartes knelt briefly as he passed. Even Mechanicus adepts whispered prayers in Binaric. The word Divinus Fulmen, divine lightning, spread across the Vox. Thor looked upon their faces, weary, scarred, but alive. They no longer feared him, they worshipped him, and it terrified him. "Stop this," he said. "I am no god to you." A young guardsman, no older than 20, fell to his knees. "You saved us, my lord. The Emperor sent you." His voice broke like thunder. "The Emperor needs no messenger. He has enough ghosts." But they only bowed deeper. In the shadows beyond the camp, Inquisitor Mavain watched silently, her face unreadable. "They'll worship anything that listens back," murmured Vera beside her. "He's becoming what they need." Lyra didn't respond immediately. "And what they need is what destroys us most quickly." That night, the dreams began. Psychers across Velkara screamed in their sleep. Servo skulls spun in perfect circles, whispering numbers that spelled the same word in every dialect: ascension. Thor, too, dreamed. He saw the stars burning with his own lightning. He saw mortals raising hammers in his image. He saw banners with his sigil fluttering beside the imperial Aquila. And above it all, he saw the Emperor, silent, unmoving, his golden eyes fixed on the God of Thunder with something that looked like sorrow. When Thor woke, the ground around him was scorched with the imprint of Mjolnir. The sky above the camp pulsed with faint auroras, twisting in impossible geometries. Tzeentch was whispering again, through the warp and through mortal hearts. Inquisitor Mavain summoned Thor to her command spire. "You've changed the people," she said bluntly. "I gave them courage. You gave them faith. That's not courage. That's dependency." He frowned. "You live in darkness and worship a corpse. Should they not believe in something alive?" Lyra slammed her fist on the table. "Belief is how chaos spreads. First it's hope, then it's prayer, then it's possession. Every act of reverence they give you is a thread in Tzeentch's web. You are becoming his instrument." "Then tell me, Inquisitor, would you rather they kneel in despair?" "Yes, because despair is honest. Hope is a weapon we cannot control." The storm in his eyes dimmed. For a moment, neither spoke. "I will not be their god," Thor said quietly. "You already are," Lyra whispered. Far above Velkara, in the eddies of the warp, the Lord of Change laughed softly to itself. The thunder learns humility, how precious, how mortal. It looked across the endless sea of possibility, where fate rippled like silk. The pattern was shifting. The storm was growing stronger. And somewhere, deep in the Imperial Palace on Terra, a single golden eye opened for the first time in 10,000 years. Months passed. Velkara was no longer a battlefield. It was a shrine. Pilgrims arrived by the thousands, trudging across ash plains littered with the bones of Tyranids and the ruins of Mechanicus citadels. They came from hive worlds, forge moons, and death worlds, whispering prayers to the Stormfather, a new name on their lips. The ecclesiarchy tried to seize control first. Sermons thundered from cathedrals, declaring that Thor Odinson was a saint of the Emperor, a divine weapon sent to cleanse the galaxy. They forged icons of lightning bolts crossed with the Aquila, painted murals of Thor smiting daemons beside the God Emperor's throne. But the Inquisition moved faster. Lyra Mavain's report spread through the Ordos like wildfire, classified under the sigil Extremis, Divinus Entity. Her words were cold and clinical, yet every line pulsed with urgency. Subject displays reality-altering potential on par with known warp entities, but devoid of overt corruption. He generates faith through mere presence. This faith, unbound to the ecclesiarchy, threatens the Imperium's psychic equilibrium. In plain terms, Thor was too pure, too powerful, and too dangerous to live. On orbit above Valkara, a granite-striped cruiser broke from the warp, its hull glimmering with wards older than most civilizations. The sacrosanct Judicium. Grandmaster Alaric himself stood aboard, his armor a cathedral of silver and scripture. He had seen gods before, or things that pretended to be. He had banished daemons, slain heretics, and stared into the eye of terror itself. But what waited below was different. "The Inquisition call him saint," Alaric murmured to his chaplain. "The Ordo Malleus call him an anomaly. And yet he bleeds, eats, and fights as a man. A paradox." "Do we destroy him?" the chaplain asked. Alaric looked down at the planet wreathed in storms. "We judge him." On the surface, Thor felt the warp ripple like a heartbeat. He looked up from the forge where he had been rebuilding an imperial bastion with mortal laborers, hammering adamantine beams into place with his bare hands. The sky tore. Silver streaks burned through the atmosphere, trailing psychic fire. The people fell to their knees, thinking angels had come. But Thor knew war when he saw it. When the Grey Knights descended, they came as executioners, silent, perfect, utterly without mercy. Thunder rolled as Mjolnir met Nemesis blades. Each strike shattered air and ground alike. Energy shields flared, runes screamed, prayers turned to ash. Thor did not wish to fight them, but he was no fool. He saw judgment in their eyes, not understanding. "Brothers," Thor roared over the storm, "I seek no war with you." "All gods are lies," answered Grandmaster Alaric, his voice echoing through his helm, "and we are the Emperor's truth." The battle that followed became legend. Lightning met sanctified flame. Psychic wards cracked under divine thunder. At one point, Thor caught Alaric's hammer mid-swing, and for a heartbeat, their weapons locked. Power against faith. "You serve your Emperor, then serve his will, not your fear." "We are his will," Alaric spat back. They clashed once more. Mjolnir struck Alaric's chest, shattering wards and sending him crashing through a cathedral wall. Yet Thor did not press the attack. He turned his back, throwing the hammer skyward. The lightning it summoned struck the heavens, not the knights. "If I am to be your enemy, then strike me now. But if you are servants of light, then see me." Alaric rose slowly, armor cracked, spirit unbroken. The storm above dimmed, its fury quieting as Thor lowered Mjolnir. And in that silence, the Grey Knight saw something he could not name. Something not of the warp nor the materium. Something true. "He does not reek of chaos. He reeks of freedom." The chaplain hesitated. "Orders, my lord?" Alaric looked up at the figure of Thor standing amidst the ruins, hallowed and lightning. "None," he said finally. "Not yet." When the Grey Knights withdrew, the ecclesiarchy declared it a miracle. The Inquisition called it a failure, and the people called it faith. From Velcara to the Segmentum Solar, whispers of the living storm spread like wildfire. Some Astartes chapters, disillusioned, broken by endless crusades, began to adopt his sigil alongside the Aquila. The Storm Wardens, the Sons of Dawn, even rogue inquisitors began to murmur that perhaps the Emperor's will had taken new form. And in the Imperium, chaos God stirred uneasily. Khorne's rage frothed at the thought of a warrior who killed without bloodlust. Tinch watched his prophecies unravel. Slanesh hungered for the worship Thor refused, and even Nurgle paused his laughter, sensing something alien to decay. Inquisitor Mavain knew what this meant. The Imperium had survived 10,000 years with faith in a single god, the Emperor. A new one, even a false one, could shatter that unity faster than any daemon incursion. And so she sent a final message into the void. Thor Odinson, designation Ethereal Threat Class Alpha. If unchecked, may ignite a second heresy. Faith unbound by imperial doctrine. Response, sanction total planetary cleansing if containment fails. Her hands trembled as she sealed the order. Emperor, forgive me, she whispered. He means well. But in the grimdark future, meaning well means nothing at all. On the surface, Thor stood upon the walls of Velcara, staring into the endless storms that mirrored his own soul. He had fought monsters and men alike. He had seen gods rise and fall. But this war, a war for belief, was one he could not win with Mjolnir. Lightning flickered around his hands, softer now, more sorrowful than furious. If hope itself be heresy, then let me be the heretic who carries the storm. The thunder rolled in answer, and somewhere far beyond the stars, upon the golden throne, the Emperor, silent, dying, eternal, almost smiled. The galaxy had always burned, but never like this. The spark lit on Velcara spread faster than any heresy before it. The cult of the living storm had become a movement, a whisper turned thunderclap. Across hundreds of worlds, pilgrims raised their hammers skyward, crying out for a god who answered. To the broken and forgotten, Thor was hope incarnate, a savior who walked among them, who repaired their machines, healed their wounds, and demanded no tithes. His power was undeniable, his compassion blasphemous. But to the Imperium, his very existence was poison. Within the vaulted halls of Terra, the High Lords argued in shadowed councils. The ecclesiarch slammed his fist upon the marble table, vox amplifiers carrying his wrath through the chamber. A god who is not the Emperor cannot be allowed to stand. Beside him, the inquisitorial representative, Lyra Mavain herself, newly elevated to Lord Inquisitor, spoke in a voice that was equal parts reverence and regret. He inspires loyalty beyond doctrine. If we destroy him, we create a martyr. If we let him live, we birth a rebellion of faith. Either way, the storm comes. The silence that followed was worse than any verdict. When the meeting ended, the Ordo Hereticus received its command. Operation Divine Censure. Exterminatus Level Sanction. Target, Thor Odinson. Secondary, all affiliated cults within Segmentum Obscurus. On Valkara, thunder rolled as the skies blackened. Thor stood upon the citadel walls once again, surrounded by followers, soldiers, priests, even an Astartes captain from the Storm Wardens. All knelt before him, voices raised in desperate unity. "Thor, father, the Imperium comes," said Captain Doran, his armor painted with lightning sigils instead of chapter markings. "Battle groups from 3 sectors, they mean to burn this world." Thor's eyes, electric blue and weary beyond mortal years, turned skyward. "I have known tyrants who called themselves gods, but I had not thought to find them here." A young priestess stepped forward, clutching a relic fashioned from a fragment of Mjolnir's lightning, a crystal that hummed softly in her palms. "We will die for you, my lord." Thor shook his head. "No, you will live for one another. My war is not against men, it is against despair." But even as he spoke, the fleet arrived. The night split open with orbital bombardment. Columns of fire fell from the heavens as Imperial cruisers unleashed holy wrath. Fortress walls melted under bombardment, mountains turned to glass, and yet through the ruin Thor strode like a storm given flesh. Mjolnir spun in his grasp, deflecting orbital land strikes as if they were raindrops. Bolts of pure warp lightning surged from the hammer, lancing into the sky to tear ships apart in orbit. The Astartes below fought beside him, storm wardens, celestial lions, and even rogue elements of the Black Templars who refused to smite one who wielded faith so purely. The war of faith and thunder had begun. Every world that had ever prayed for deliverance now burned for it. Every governor who suppressed Thor's name found rebellion in his streets. Entire regiments of the Astra Militarum refused to fire on the Thunder God's faithful, citing divine visions. The Imperium fractured, not from chaos, but from hope. Inquisitor Mavain watched the hololithic displays aboard her flagship, each red icon representing a world lost to storm heresy. Her hand trembled over the command rune that would unleash the Exterminatus payloads. "He's not a daemon. He's not even a heretic. He's what we prayed for, and now we must kill him." Her aide, a junior interrogator, hesitated. "My lady, if the Emperor truly works through him, then he will forgive me," she snapped, slamming the rune. The sky above Valkara ignited. Cyclonic torpedoes screamed through the upper atmosphere, their payloads meant to scour the planet clean. Thor saw them falling. The heavens burned like Ragnarok reborn. He reached upward, summoning every last ounce of his divine might. Mjolnir blazed, arcs of lightning carving through orbit, meeting the falling torpedoes head-on. The explosion that followed tore apart the clouds, and then reality itself. The warp screamed. Thor's power was never of chaos, but its intensity warped the veil all the same. Rifts opened like bleeding wounds in the sky, daemons howling as the boundary between realms frayed. So this is the cost. Power unrestrained, faith untempered. He looked back one last time at the mortals who had followed him, their faces lit by the firestorm's glow. Go, live, build anew. Then he hurled Mjolnir skyward, one final throw that split the heavens. The hammer struck the largest torpedo in mid-descent, detonating its payload prematurely. The explosion consumed the sky. For miles, all that could be seen was blinding light and rolling thunder. When the light faded, the fleet's auspex readings went silent. Velkhara's surface was gone, replaced by a churning storm of energy, half real, half warp. No trace of Thor or his followers remained, but the storm did not dissipate. It sang, in low, haunting tones, like a heartbeat through the void. It pulsed with living lightning. "He contained the blast," whispered a gray knight aboard the observing ship. "He became the storm." Inquisitor Mavain bowed her head. "Then may the Emperor forgive us all." Across the stars, strange phenomena began to occur. Ships caught in warp storms reported hearing thunder in the void, and sometimes a single word whispered through static, "Rise." Hammers began appearing as relics on dead worlds, still crackling with faint light. Whole chapters of the Adeptus Astartes swore that in their darkest battles a storm would appear, and amidst it a flash of golden hair and a hammer that defied reason. The ecclesiarchy could not silence it. The Inquisition could not bury it. The Mechanicus could not explain it. Thor Odinson was gone, yet everywhere. The war of faith and thunder had ended, but the galaxy was changed forever. The warp does not forget. Long after Velkhara vanished into blinding stormfire, its echo still reverberated through the Imperium like a wound that refused to close. The demons of the great powers prowled its edges, drawn by the scent of something alien. Power that was not theirs, faith that did not feed them. In the black halls of Khorne's brass citadel, rivers of blood boiled as the blood god stirred from his throne of skulls. A god who denies slaughter, yet makes war more glorious than any mortal. His hammer sings with my music, yet his heart defies me. His rage sent shockwaves through the warp, shattering lesser realms. But Tzeentch only laughed, feathers rippling across endless wings of shifting color. He is not yours, Warfather. He is a paradox, a god without worship, a faith that breeds defiance. Such a thing cannot exist. Nurgle's voice came next, a gurgling rumble beneath their quarrel. "Oh, but it does exist. The mortals hope because of him, and hope festers so beautifully before it rots. and from the shadow where desire took shape, Slaanesh purred. He is music and thunder, agony and ecstasy entwined. He will fall, as all beauty must. I will taste the sorrow of his believers when their God fails them. The four gods turned their attention to the wound in the warp, the storm scar. It pulsed with light that none of them had made, that none of them understood. Something stood at its center. Thor, or what remained of him. His body no longer obeyed the limits of flesh. His essence had become lightning incarnate, his thoughts vast and scattered like the storm itself. The explosion had fused his divine spark to the veil between realities, turning him into the living seal that prevented the galaxy from being swallowed by the detonation's warp breach. He saw everything, stars burning, fleets moving, souls praying, dying, and being born anew. Every thunderstorm across 1,000,000 worlds whispered his name, and he heard the laughter of gods. "You are mine, thunder whelp," Khorne roared, materializing amid the storm, his form towering like a mountain of brass and hate, eyes burning coals of slaughter. "You fought, you killed, you bled, you are my kin." Thor's voice echoed like 1,000 storms at once. "I fought for life, you butcher for sport. We are not the same." Khorne's axe descended, and the warp screamed as it met Mjolnir. Sparks of unreality scattered across eternity. For the first time, the blood god was forced back. "Then die unclaimed," Khorne howled, vanishing into his crimson sea. Next came Tzeentch, whose laughter rippled like waves of oil. "You are fascinating, lightning-born. Power without corruption, will without ambition. But even you cannot escape entropy. You will become part of my design." "I bow to no design. I am the storm that breaks them." The architect's grin only widened. "Ah, then you will learn. Even storms have patterns." He vanished, leaving threads of fate twisting through the storm, attempting to ensnare Thor's essence. The lightning god shattered them one by one, but each time he broke a thread, 2 more formed. The warp was learning him. Time, if such a thing exists in that place, passed. Thor felt himself fading, the price of holding the rift closed, consuming his being, his thoughts scattered like raindrops, his memories dissolving into flashes of color and sound. He remembered Asgard. He remembered Midgard. He remembered mortals who once raised mead to his name, and mortals who now raised lasguns in his defense. And through it all, he remembered the Inquisitor, Lyra Mavan. Her voice had trembled when she condemned him, but her faith had not. She had done what she thought right, and that, perhaps, was what pained him most. "Even gods cannot outlive consequence," he whispered into the void. In the Imperium, the storm that had consumed Velkara still raged centuries later. Ships that ventured too near found themselves struck by bolts of impossible energy, half lightning, half soul fire. Those who survived claimed they saw visions of a man of light standing in the tempest, holding back an ocean of shadow. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared the anomaly a perpetual energy source. The ecclesiasticar called it the Emperor's thunder veil. But the people who lived on nearby worlds called it something else. They called it the Watcher in the Storm. And sometimes, when the lightning cracked just right, they swore they heard words carried on the thunder. "Stand firm, fear no darkness." Yet as Thor held the warp at bay, something deeper stirred. The barrier he formed became a point of convergence, a place where mortal faith, warp energy, and divine will coalesced into something new. From the prayers of the faithful, from the echoes of his sacrifice, from the tears of mortals who remembered him, a light began to form within the storm. Not chaos, not order, not the Emperor, something between. A new power in the Imperium, fragile but pure. The Chaos Gods felt it like a blade between their ribs. "Impossible," hissed Tzeentch. "Unforgivable," spat Khorne. "Unnatural," croaked Nurgle. "Delicious," sighed Slaanesh. They turned their will upon it, tearing at the fragile new divinity with all the malice of eternity. But Thor stood before it, defiant. "You have your dominions," he roared. "Leave this one be." And with a final strike of Mjolnir, a thunderclap that shattered 1,000 demon realms, he sealed the light within the warp, a seed that would one day grow into hope again. The warp quieted. The storm dimmed, and for the first time in eons, silence fell. Thor Odinson, the god of thunder, drifted into the endless storm he had become, not dead, not alive, but eternal. In that final moment, his thoughts whispered across the galaxy like distant thunder. Let them believe, even if it kills them, especially if it saves them. Inquisitor Mavan, now old and haunted, recorded one last entry before her death. "The storm endures. Our faith is shaken. Perhaps that is good. The Emperor demands loyalty, but Thor taught us courage. In a galaxy of monsters, that is no small miracle." She sealed the log with trembling hands and looked out the viewport of her ship toward the distant lightning of the Veil. "Forgive me," she whispered. "You were never the heretic. We." In the waning years of the 42nd millennium, Inquisitor Lyra Mandave no longer stood as the fearsome blade of the Ordo Hereticus. She was a relic, bones wrapped in parchment skin, voice carried by rebreather hiss. Her name had been struck from the Imperial archives decades ago, her service quietly erased by those who feared her conclusions. But she was not finished. Velkhara's storm had not faded, even after centuries of sanctioned silence. No fleet dared approach it. No astropath could endure its whispers. Yet the lightning that rolled across its surface carried structured pulses, rhythmic, patterned, purposeful. To the Mechanicus, it was random noise. To the Ecclesiarchy, a test of faith. But to Lyra Mavain, it was a message. And she meant to answer. Her shuttle shuddered as it slipped through the outer veil of the thunder scar, its hull wrapped in psychic null wards and blessings torn from forbidden tomes. Her escort, a kill team of Death Watch veterans, moved with silent efficiency, though none dared speak of why an old Inquisitor had dragged them into a warp storm that even Grey Knights feared. "Approach vector locked," intoned the pilot. "Gravity fluctuations within tolerance range. If you're wrong about this, my lady, we'll die," Mavain said, her voice metallic through her augmetic throat. "That is acceptable." The storm outside twisted into impossible geometries. Lightning shaped like runes coiled around the shuttle, whispering in tongues older than humanity. The pilot crossed himself. "Emperor, preserve us!" He might, but I doubt it. They broke through the veil and saw it. The heart of the storm. A vast sphere of shimmering energy suspended above a shattered world. In its core, lightning cascaded inward rather than outward, as if feeding an unseen center. And there, suspended in radiant turbulence, was Mjolnir. Still spinning, still burning, still alive. Mavain's breath hitched, her augmetic heart stuttered. By the throne! She could feel the hammer's pulse resonate through her armor, through her bones. It wasn't warp-tainted. If anything, it rejected the warp, radiating an order that should not exist. The Death Watch warriors fell to their knees, not out of worship, but out of instinct. The presence of the hammer pressed down upon them like gravity made divine. "He's still here," one whispered. Mavain's withered lips curved into a faint smile. "No, not here. Everywhere." The readings were impossible. The storm's core wasn't growing weaker. It was stabilizing, holding the warp at bay like a dam. Entire sectors that bordered the Velkaran Rift had experienced reduced demonic incursions. Astropathic messages sent near it arrived faster, clearer. Thor's sacrifice had become a bulwark. The Emperor had his golden throne. Thor had his storm. But that truth could never be allowed to spread. If the Ecclesiarchy learned of this anomaly, it would fracture the Imperium again. If the Mechanicus studied it, they would unmake reality trying to reproduce it. So Mavain did what Inquisitors do best. She lied. She returned to Terra on a ship wreathed in falsehood and holy sigils. Her data logs were sealed under triple encryption, accessible only to her and those she trusted. In the labyrinthine halls of the Inquisition fortress, she met with 4 individuals, Inquisitors all, from different ordos, bound together by shared disillusionment. They met in secret, beneath the flickering lumen of an abandoned cathedral deep under the Martian crust. Mavain placed a stasis shard upon the table. Within it shimmered a single sliver of lightning, frozen mid-strike. "You know what this is?" she asked. Inquisitor Darian Voss, a scarred veteran of the Ordo Malleus, frowned. Warp anomaly residue? No, she said. Proof that divinity can exist without corruption. Proof that the warp is not the only source of miracles. The room went silent. The others stared, torn between awe and horror. "Blasphemy!" hissed one. "Revelation," whispered another. Mavane's voice grew colder. "We have spent 10 millennia worshipping a corpse while the galaxy rots. The Emperor's dream was not tyranny, it was enlightenment. Thor Odinson showed us that. I intend to keep that light alive, quietly." She reached into her robes and withdrew a small sigil, a stylized hammer wrapped in lightning. "I call it the Ordo Tempestus, a secret order within the Inquisition itself, dedicated to preserving the truth of Thor's sacrifice, to studying the storm, and to protecting the fragile hope it represented. They would operate unseen, masked as witch hunters, relic collectors, storm watchers, but their creed was simple. Faith without chains, power without corruption, storm without chaos. Centuries passed. The official imperial record listed Lyra Mavane as deceased, burned for heresy, her works purged. Yet hidden deep in forbidden archives, encrypted sigils still bore her mark. And across the Imperium, rumors spread of mysterious agents who appeared when the walk storms grew wild, who carried lightning-marked rosaries and vanished before the Ordos could find them. Some said they were rogue inquisitors. Some said they were Xenos cults. A few whispered something else entirely. In the present day, aboard a Mechanicus listening post near the Velkaran sector, a junior tech priest recorded a curious anomaly. Every 888 hours, the storm pulsed once, precisely, rhythmically. Each pulse transmitted the same signal, a sequence of 5 simple binary bursts. When translated through ancient data cant, it read, "Stand, defy, hope, endure, rise." The priest stared, awed and terrified. When he turned to report it, he found his superior already standing behind him, robed in storm gray and bearing a sigil of lightning crossed with an eagle. "Record deleted," he intoned. "For the Emperor?" the priest asked. The hooded figure smiled faintly. "For the one who reminded him what that means." The storm began to change. For 10,000 years it had roared as a guardian, a bulwark of thunder that held the warp's madness at bay. But now its rhythm altered. The lightning strikes grew slower, heavier, deliberate. The Mechanicus augurs called it decay. The Ordo Tempestus called it awakening. The galaxy trembled with omens. In the segmentum obscurus, astropaths cried out during transit, their eyes bursting into light. In the halo stars, dead worlds briefly bloomed with electricity. Entire hive cities reported auroras shimmering through their underhives, whispering in unknown tongues. And then the message came. A signal buried in the static storm surrounding Vel'Kara. 5 words, identical to those first recorded centuries before. Stand, defy, hope, endure, rise. But this time, there was more. A final burst of data, a signature, the same warp imprint as the Thunder God himself. Thor's storm was alive. Deep within the Ordo Tempestus bastion fortress Tempest's Eye, High Inquisitor Rilan Varas studied the data scrolls projected before him. The storm's readings formed complex waveforms, not random, not natural. Speech. "He's communicating," whispered one of the adepts. "Not with words," Varas murmured, "with intent." The air shimmered. Even here, hundreds of light years away, the thunder was audible, faint, echoing through the machinery like a heartbeat. Varas turned to his acolytes. "Prepare the pilgrimage. It is time to enter the storm." The fleet that departed from the Tempestus enclaves was unlike any sanctioned Imperial armada. Cloaked in null fields and faith tech forbidden to the Mechanicus, its ships were silent prayers cast into the void. They passed through dead sectors where no light remained, through warp scars that pulsed like infected wounds. And as they neared Vel'Kara, their Geller fields flickered, not from demonic assault, but from something pushing back the warp itself. Then they saw it. The storm no longer orbited the planet. It rose from it. A colossal pillar of lightning stretched into space, a storm given structure and form. Within it swirled shapes, half light, half memory. Faces of warriors long dead, angels, demons, thunderheads sculpted into titanic shifting forms. And at its heart, bound by lightning like veins of pure will, hovered Mjolnir. The fleet halted. Sensor readings spiked into madness. The storm emitted gravity wells, electromagnetic waves all at once. But amid the chaos, one signal pierced the static. A human voice, transmitted through all channels, across Vox and mind alike. It was deep, resonant, heavy with exhaustion, yet infinite in power. "Children of Terra," the crews froze. "You have endured more than the gods ever could. You have fought in a universe that forgot mercy. You have stood." The thunder rolled, and the lightning bent into the shape of a man, colossal, golden-haired, haloed in flame. But the storm weakens, my time wanes. Varas fell to his knees. "All-Father of Thunder, you yet live?" "No, not as life. I am the echo that endures where divinity dies. My prison falters, the warp claws anew." The storm convulsed. From its periphery shadows tore free, demons, vast and primal, roaring against the light. "If the storm breaks, the galaxy will drown in madness. You must choose, preserve my storm, or let it die and rebuild anew." The Ordo Tempestus was torn. Half sought to maintain the barrier at all cost, to chain Thor's essence forever, to protect mankind. The others believed his final act should be release, to end his suffering and allow a new balance to form. The debate became war. Within the fleet, brother fought brother. Ships turned on ships. The void erupted in fire, holy hymns and betrayal echoing as the thunderstorm loomed above them, watching like a dying god. Varas stood at the command dais of his burning flagship, his robes charred, his face lit by lightning. He opened the vox link to the storm. "Thunder God, forgive us. We are not worthy of your light." Thor's voice was distant, fading. "You were never meant to be worthy, only to endure." Then came the last pulse. Mjolnir rose higher, gathering the storm's power, lightning drawn into it from every direction. The fleet's instruments overloaded, reality itself trembling. For the All-Father who fell for mortals, for the mortals who dared defy gods, let there be one last storm. The lightning exploded outward, not as destruction, but transformation. Every demon within the rift was unmade, their essence burned clean. Every ship caught within the storm vanished from all sensors. The warp rippled across the segmentum like water struck by light. And when the fury ended, Velkara was gone. In its place hung a pale gold and silver lightning, silent, radiant, untouchable. It was catalogued by imperial cartographers as the Stormheart Nebula. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it an anomaly. The ecclesiastic called it a divine ascension. The Ordo Tempestus called it home. A millennium later, an explorator fleet passing near the Stormheart reported a faint signal. 5 words: stand, defy, hope, endure, rise. And then faint laughter, distant, echoing across eternity. The laughter of a god who had found peace in the thunder. In the aftermath, silence reigned. For the first time in living memory, the segmentum's warp routes were calm. Astropathic transmissions that once required hours of chanting and sacrifice now passed cleanly, without distortion. Even the void itself felt lighter, as if the galaxy had taken a single breath after millennia of screaming. The Stormheart Nebula shone at the center of it all, an ever-shifting aurora of gold and silver that pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of a sleeping titan. Pilgrims began to gather in orbit around its radiant edges, whole flotillas of refugee ships forming makeshift shrines. They called it the Emperor's Halo. But the truth was buried. The Inquisition, what remained of it in that sector, moved swiftly. All surviving data logs, picked feeds, and augur readings from the storm were seized and erased. Surviving witnesses were either sworn to silence or vanished into the black ships. The official decree declared the event a miraculous warp storm purification. No mention of a fallen god, no hint of divine rebellion. Still, rumors spread faster than any sanction could stop. In the underhives of distant worlds, children played with makeshift hammers, crying out in mock thunder. In the cloisters of the ecclesiarchy, forbidden hymns were whispered at midnight, songs that spoke not of the emperor's golden throne, but of a storm father who defied the warp itself to protect humanity. The Mechanicus named the anomaly a living machine spirit, a self-sustaining storm that obeyed no known laws of physics. Tech priests built orbiting stations to study it, though many who ventured too close were found vaporized, struck by bolts of lightning that seemed almost deliberate. To the common man, it was a symbol. To the priests, a test of faith. To the Inquisition, a danger. To the storm itself, it was memory. Velkara's ashes became legend. Generations later, the Order of the Thunder Saint arose. They wore lightning sigils upon their armor, carrying sanctified hammers as symbols of divine judgment. Officially, they were a militant branch of the ecclesiarchy. In truth, their creed was older, secret, passed down through fragmented scriptures and coded Mechanicus data. They believed the storm still heard. Their rites were brutal and pure. Initiates were cast out into the void beneath electric storms, forced to survive until lightning struck their armor. Those who returned were considered touched by the saint. Those who didn't were claimed by the storm. Every one of them fought with fury and conviction that bordered on madness. Entire war zones turned when they arrived, thunder echoing across trenches as if reality itself remembered a god's footsteps. Their chapter hymn was forbidden, but it was sung all the same. When gods fall, men must rise. When silence reigns, thunder replies. High above Terra, in a vault no mortal may enter, the Inquisition preserved a relic, a hammer. Small, cracked, blackened by heat and time, its haft was broken, its head dented beyond recognition. But sometimes, when the storms rolled over the palace spires, lightning would flicker across its surface, faint, restrained, yet alive. The custodians who watched it never spoke of it aloud, but they knew. In that relic's hum was not wrath or vengeance, but only watchful calm. Thor's essence lingered not as a god demanding worship, but as a protector who refused to die. And then, one night, it happened again. The sky above Terra's southern pole split open in silence. A single bolt of lightning struck the ocean with impossible precision, vaporizing miles of ice. When the storm faded, the hammer's containment field flickered once, and the artifact was gone. The imperial records would call it theft. The ecclesiarchy called it prophecy. The Inquisition called it a disaster. But among the Ordo Tempestus remnants, an encrypted transmission was received. It contained no words, no signatures, only a single pulse of thunder, and a sigil that hadn't been seen in millennia, a stylized hammer wrapped in lightning. Then faint laughter rolled across the Vox. "Still standing, mortals?" The message ended, leaving nothing but static. And across the galaxy, storms began to rise again, subtle at first, but growing. The silence was over. 10,000 years after the Stormheart Nebula first ignited the void, it was still there, unchanged, defiant, eternal. Imperial maps listed it as a warp-inert anomaly. Pilgrim fleets called it the Sanctum Tempestus. But to the hidden few who remembered, it was the resting place of a god. Every millennium, the nebula pulsed, once, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. Astropaths went mad, hearing voices in the static, not demonic whispers, but the echo of thunder. Stand, defy, hope, endure, rise. Those words had become creed. The Order of the Thunder Saint had grown from zealots into something greater, a sanctioned militant order beneath the ecclesiarchy, though none truly controlled them. They roamed war zones ignored by the High Lords, striking where hope was lowest, saving worlds already written off as lost. They claimed no homeworld, they built no fortress monastery. Instead, they followed the storms. Their ships bore cracked lightning bolts instead of aquilas. Their weapons were hammers and storm blades, forged from the same rare alloy found in the Stormheart's debris, a metal that hummed when touched by lightning, like a heartbeat remembering something ancient. To fight beside them was to feel the air charge with faith itself. On the world of Carthan IX, during the siege of Ashvault, the traitor legions had already overrun the planet. Corrupted Astartes of the Black Legion, their armor daubed in the sigils of Khorne and Slaanesh. The loyalists were broken, morale shattered, and then the skies darkened. No ships, no orbital bombardment, just thunder. Lightning struck the heavens, striking the heretic lines. From the storm walked warriors in cracked gold and silver armor, eyes burning with blue fire. Their leader carried a massive warhammer, its head wrapped in arcing light. He spoke into the Vox for all to hear. "You face the storm's fury. You face his memory." And when he swung the hammer, the battlefield erupted in pure white. The heretics screamed as their weapons melted in their hands. Warp-born creatures fled back into the Imperium, their forms undone by light that was neither holy nor demonic. For one fleeting moment, the veil between myth and reality lifted. The storm sang, a hymn of old gods and dying stars. When it ended, the traitors were ash. The loyalists knelt in awe, and the thunder rolled on into silence. Later, in the ashes, a Mechanicus magus analyzed fragments of the battlefield's energy signature. It matched one recorded 10,000 years before, the signature of Mjolnir. He never reported it. Instead, he sealed the data in a stasis vault, whispering the words burned into his mind by the thunder. When the Emperor sleeps, the storm keeps watch. On Terra, the High Lords argued whether to declare the Order of the Thunder Saint heretical. Their symbols defied codified worship, their power unregulated, their miracles unverified. But every time they met, a lightning bolt struck the spire of the Senatorium Imperialis. Never enough to cause harm, just a reminder. And so they allowed the order to exist, quietly, fearfully, because deep down they knew some powers could not be chained, not even by the Imperium. Across the stars, myths grew. Some said Thor was the Emperor's lost son, born of the storm before the Primarchs. Others claimed he was a god of an age before mankind forgot the stars. The truth didn't matter. For those who fought and died in the Emperor's name, it was enough to believe that somewhere out beyond the void, the thunder still listened. On a forgotten world at the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, a lone guardsman stood atop a hill of bodies, last gun empty, eyes fixed on the storm rolling in. He was bleeding out, alone, surrounded by the corpses of men and monsters alike. He whispered a prayer, one he'd heard as a child. "Stormfather, let me fall with thunder." The clouds split open. A single bolt of lightning struck the ground beside him, vaporizing everything within meters, everything except the guardsman himself. When the smoke cleared, he was gone. All that remained was a scorch mark in the shape of a hammer. Centuries later, scholars would debate whether the Emperor and the Stormfather were one and the same, two facets of humanity's will to endure. The ecclesiarchy declared such thoughts heretical, but heresy or not, the legend endured. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, where faith is both weapon and curse, sometimes even gods fall, and sometimes they rise again as thunder. The galaxy remembers in fragments, in half-truths and holy lies. Thor's storm became scripture, his sacrifice doctrine, his laughter heresy. But beneath it all, the core remained, that one spark of defiance that even the Imperium's endless bureaucracy could not drown. A whisper in every storm, a flicker in every machine spirit's hum, a pulse in the very soul of mankind. He had arrived as a god, alien and mighty, bewildered by a universe where hope was heresy. He had fought to bring light to darkness and nearly drowned in it. But in doing so, he gave humanity something the Emperor himself could never fully restore. The idea that divinity might exist for them, not above them. Every thunderclap across the void is a memory of that sacrifice. Every spark of lightning on a distant world is a hymn. Every storm is a promise. One day, when the warp howls again and the stars begin to fade, the storm will rise anew, not as salvation nor vengeance, but as reminder that even in the darkest millennium, when gods fall and empires rot, there will always be thunder in the hearts of those who refuse to kneel. And somewhere beyond the light of dying suns, a voice will echo through the void. Stand, defy, hope, endure, rise. The storm answers.